Hello and welcome to this new episode of Business Africa. I am Dea Yoka. Here are the headlines. Egyptian startups raised more than $150 million during the first 4 months of 2022, which marked a 212% increase compared with the same period last year. In Cameroon, Kribi's deep sea port is aiming for the sub-regional top export spot. 4 years after the launch of its activities, it is one of the largest contributors of customs revenues in the Cameroonian state coffers. Further east in Uganda, high fuel prices are threatening the fishing sector. Many fishermen have already halted their activities as they wait for the state to act. With $81 million raised in May 2022, the value of investments raised by Egyptian startups is the highest in the MENA region, which comprises North Africa and the Middle East. A strong and diversified entrepreneurial support system partly explains this growth.
The Egyptian startup sector has grown rapidly in recent years and is now the top spot in Africa for innovation. Last year, the sector attracted a record $491 million in funding, according to Magnit's 2021 Egypt Venture Capital Investment Report. The growth coincides with the government commitment to creating a favorable business climate and also unprecedented investor participation, which almost doubled between 2020 and 2021. Various entrepreneurial support structures, such as incubators, accelerators, and co-working spaces, contribute to develop a growth strategy for these young companies. Fundraising on the African continent is also increasing. By the end of May 2022, the total funds raised by African startups amounted to $2.7 billion, according to Africa the Big Deal. At this rate, the platform expects to raise nearly $7 billion by the end of the year. The funds raised by Egyptian companies in the seed phase have increased by more than 212% compared to the same period of the previous year.
Maybe you can show the website.
To discuss this, we're joined by Tamer Azar, a partner at Showrock Partners, an entrepreneur and businessman. At the end of May 2022, the total funds raised by African startups amounted to $2.7 billion. Between January and May, Egyptian startups recorded a 212% increase in funds they raised compared with the same period last year. What are the specific characteristics of the Egyptian innovation ecosystem?
To be honest, what's happening across Africa, MENA, and Egypt is, without question, absolutely monumental, right? It's phenomenal, and it's incredible to be a part of, right? If you look at data from Q1 2022, you'll see that in Egypt, startups have raised about $160 million just in the first quarter, which is about a third of what that same industry raised in 2021. So if you sort of do some basic math, it is really possible for you to imagine a market that will attract $1 billion worth of investment in the next 12 to 18 months from today, which is absolutely incredible, right? No one saw it coming, and it's unbelievable.
Considering the growth in venture capital financing of Egyptian companies, can we already regard Egypt as a hub?
Without question, right? So in 2021, the whole continent received about 5.6 billion. And Egypt was roughly about 10% of that. So Nigeria was in the top spot with about 1.8 billion. South Africa came in second at roughly 800 million. And Egypt came in third, with Kenya coming in fourth, right? So Egypt is definitely one of the top startup hubs in Africa. And generally, the top 4 players in Africa are all very well positioned to become global startup hubs. Not just Egypt, not just Nigeria, all of them. This is a phenomenal performance by all the countries.
In Egypt, technical and financial support play key roles in the development of young companies. How do the different support structures for entrepreneurs work to help develop a growth strategy?
So in any ecosystem, there are multiple players, and each one of them plays a role in the development of these startups, right? Universities, colleges, technical institutes, technology institutes, co-working spaces, angel groups, venture capital funds, and even private equity funds as well as governments, right? So each one of these players plays a very specific role in the nourishment of that ecosystem. And if one of these elements isn't there, then the ecosystem is being throttled or held back, right? It's our responsibility as an industry to all work together so we can function effectively and provide the right amount of support for these incredible companies.
As an entrepreneur, what did you put in place to continue supporting the ecosystem and other startups during these difficult times?
Like many investors across the world, we've advised our startups to prioritize closing the rounds over optimizing the rounds. We've also recommended that they tranche their rounds. So if they had a larger round in mind, perhaps divide it into multiple smaller rounds. And for those of them who are not raising now, we recommended that they think about their burn, adjust, prepare for a much longer time period where fundraising will be challenging. And we also suggest that they prepare for the next round by focusing on hard data, on fundamentals, right? So the market has dramatically changed and we face completely different market conditions, right? And many investors, especially large global funds, have been burned and are now moving past high sort of GMV figures and starting to focus more on unit economics and fundamentals. So it's really important as a company, not just to focus on fundamentals for fundraising, but to focus on fundamentals so you can weather the storm. So save as much money as you can, reduce your burn as much money as you can, prioritize your rounds, tranche your rounds, and focus on fundamentals.
So we noticed that the fintech sector is pretty well established in Egypt. What about the deep tech sector?
So deep tech is a really interesting space, and we're starting to see more and more deep tech companies coming out of Egypt. There's been a tremendous investment in STEM education in Egypt in the past decade, and we're now starting to see the fruits of some of that labor. And it's completely incredible. So at Shuruk, we've invested in a deep tech company called Proteinia that works in both protein engineering and protein production, which is an incredible thing to be coming out of Africa that's disrupting the pharmaceutical industry at a global scale, which is really something to be proud of to see coming out of Egypt in the deep tech space.
Tamer Azar, thank you for answering our questions.
Thank you for having me.
Cameroon's deep sea port of Kribi wishes to become more competitive and attractive. A new platform has been launched by the Bolloré Group on a 7-hectare site. The goal is for Kribi to be at the center of the movement of goods in the Gulf of Guinea.
4 years after the launch of Kribi Deepwater Port in Cameroon, the port has now been ranked among the largest contributors of customs profits to the coffers of the Cameroonian state. Since the launch of operations in March 2018, the autonomous port of Kribi has generated nearly $500 million. Just to confirm this positioning today in terms of export volume, Kribi has practically gained since its inception almost 25% more market share. With a focus on oil and gas and more recently wood and cotton, over 791,000 containers have been handled to date. Kribi now aims to become the first sub-regional export hub. It is true that there is a good predominance of oil and gas traffic, which moreover ranks Kribi among the ports that generates the most export volumes in the sub-region. First, in terms of exports, with about 6 million tons per year, on average for export, and 2 million tons for the rest. To consolidate its achievements, the port has inaugurated the Kribi Logistics Hub, its first modern logistics base. The addition is widely seen as a plus for the port's attractiveness for the sub-region in terms of imports.
In Uganda, soaring fuel prices threaten the livelihoods of fishermen on Lake Victoria, when more than 5 million Ugandans depend on the sector to earn a living. Prices at the pump were 47% higher in May than in June last year, driving many fishermen out of business.
In Uganda, fishermen on Lake Victoria, the world's second largest freshwater lake, are being driven out of business by soaring fuel prices. As Twahana Bongo prepares to head out, he fears his profit will be affected regardless of the size of the catch. It has really affected us because without fuel we cannot go fishing, and even our income has dropped drastically. Fuel prices have gone up over 50% since February.
Twaha says fueling this boat is costing him more compared to 6 months ago. He's worried that escalating fuel prices could soon edge him out of business.
Twaha isn't the only one facing difficulty. Some fishermen have already ceased operations as costs become unbearable. Over 1 million people depend on fishing in this East African country. Economists are now urging the government to take action to prevent prices from rising further. Fish is one of Uganda's most important exports.
Whereas we seem to be very clear about the dealers of fuel, they are not very much well regulated. So one aspect that the government must work on, and it is within its means, is the aspect of controlling hoarding of these essential commodities.
But Kampala has ruled out intervention, saying the prices are the result of external factors.
That does it for this episode of Business Africa. For more news, stay on Africa News and on our platforms. See you soon.